I remember everybody looking at me like, what is he doing?
If you do the easy things now, life will be hard. If you do the hard things now,
Yeah.
life will be easy.
You don't want to go the way that I went, because that way is not the way that I think people should go.
What is up, everybody? And welcome back to the Schooling Struggle Podcast. It is our belief that the only guarantee in life is that we're all going to struggle. And how we choose to embrace our struggles is what empowers us to become the best versions of ourselves. My name is Pete, coming to you from Vermont. And with me is my co-host, Todd, coming to you from Washington State. What is up, Todd?
What's up, Peter? Long time no see, buddy.
I know, good living. We were on vacation last week.
Oh,
my
man.
family of myself, my wife, and my daughter
Yeah.
went to Maine, and we did this really cool dog sledding experience where we all got in the sled, and the musher stood behind us and shouted the G's and the ha's at the dogs. Ooh. And they just came ripping through the woods on these snow-packed trails, and it was wild. It was so much fun.
How do you find something like that? It was like something you always wanted to do, or you just stumbled across it?
It was something that my wife has always wanted to do, and it's a crazy business out there. It's actually really hard to get one, but because we were midweek, we were able to get a spot, and we did a 1 hour tour.
1 hour.
And it was a blast. It was awesome.
Do you feel bad for those dogs?
No, they're born and bred to do that. That's all they want to do is just run.
They're just, come on, let me go.
Yeah, they get bent out of shape when they have to stop. So, yeah, it was really cool. And the day we went was 3 degrees and -3 with the wind chill. And the musher was telling us that that's optimal conditions for the dogs. So not only was the trail packed with ice and fast, but the dogs are just ripping to go. Yeah. So we actually went twice as fast as a normal tour, and it was a blast.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah.
What's going on the left coast?
The left coast. It's snowing again, so that's cool. Well, not down here, but in the mountains. So I'm thinking about going snowboarding this week, hopefully. I finally got one of my cars out of the garage, so I fixed that. Knocked that off my 2-month-long to-do list. Today begins, in the United States anyways, National Eating Disorder Awareness Month, which I just learned about before I came here. So I always like to raise awareness of things of that nature. So I thought I'd throw that in there. But
nice. Speaking of real world stuff, the topic for tonight is something that we've touched upon a couple times in the past lightly, but I want to perform a deeper dive and discussion on it this evening. And the focus of the conversation is going to be reacting versus responding. And I think I'd like to lead the conversation off by just kind of making mention to the fact that we as humans have things happen. And for the purpose of this conversation, we're going to refer to those things that happen as the stimulus. And the stimulus can be something that impacts us positively or impacts us in a negative manner. And when the stimulus happens, there's a portion of time between the stimulus and the action that we take following the stimulus. And we as humans will typically react or respond. And when you hear that, or you think about reacting versus responding after a stimulus, what does that bring to your mind, or what is it that you'd want to share with the people that listen to our lovely voices, and how that impacts the way that you act or carry yourself following any type of stimulus?
Reacting versus responding. This is one that I've played with for a couple of years. When I think about reaction versus responses, my mind goes to being younger. And a lot of the things that I did were a reaction to stimulus that was around me or in my environment, or I felt pushed upon me, right? So like, I'm going to respond in this way that nobody's going to expect because I feel like I've been wronged in some way. And so it was, when I think reaction, I think knee jerk, like something happens to me, I have to do something in response, and it has to be swift, and it has to be something that is, that my mind would think was appropriate or beyond appropriate, something that was outside of the norm of what people were expecting of me. So funny that we talk about expectation, like all these things just kind of build on top of each other in our conversations. It's funny. But nowadays, when I think about reaction versus response, I can actually, and again, through mindfulness, but all these other tools that I have, and I think it's not just that, but I think it's maturity and just being older and seeing these patterns more often. It's typically, like in my mind right now, I think of a reaction as something where Like if I'm on my way to work or I'm driving down the street and I see somebody is in trouble or something is, there's something going on that requires a swift response that I have to pull in, I have to do something really fast. And then I can think about like how that's going to go once I get there. So that's a reaction, right? Like, if somebody's in an accident, I have to go react. I have to run down the driveway. I have to go somewhere else. I have to interact in a way that might not be as thoughtful as a response. In my mind, a response is more something that's a little more thought about, a little more intentional. I think like I have to plan it out. No, I have to plan it out, but it gets more thought before the action occurs, is what I like to think. So, yeah, that's my difference between them. How about yours?
Yeah, I think I come at it a little bit differently than you do in that, and maybe it's just the words that I'm choosing to use with kind of categorizing how my action falls under.
How about if we you tell me what reaction and response is in your definition, and maybe we can get a little. I don't know if that'll help.
So for me, I don't know if the actual definition of reacting and responding would be super helpful with how I think about it. But basically, how I think about it is different from you in that I think of a reaction as something that does not move the situation forward, is not helpful. And when I'm looking back on how I acted, I'm not proud, and I don't think that what I did was helpful. And I think that sounds to me it's a little bit different from you. You were saying like if you're driving down the road and someone needed help, you just jump out and help them without really thinking it through. And it's funny because we have these people in our society, they're called first responders, right? They're not first reactors. But maybe because they're trained in that type of thing, they are responding versus reacting. So for me, whether I think about it or not, if it was a very positive, productive action, doesn't matter how well or not that I thought through, that's a response. Whereas if it was not a positive action on my end, that's a reaction. And I think anytime that I were to stop and think something through before I were to take action, it leads me a lot closer to it being a response. I think very rarely have I stopped, think about, all right, Pete, what's the best way to handle this? And acting on that and having that be a super negative action. Whereas if I just kind of go off the handle without thinking about it, it's often typically a reaction. And in certainly my teens and my 20s, a negative stimulus would more often than not yield a reaction from me versus a response. And now that I have this awareness of the difference between the two, I try to recognize the stimulus, recognize that I can do something with that time immediately following the stimulus, and think to myself, okay, Pete, this just happened. How can I respond? And that's been helpful for me. Now, kind of the next level for me is to spend a little bit of mental energy thinking about, you can't predict every example or every scenario that you're going to face in your life, but generally speaking, how can I respond given certain situations? So like, I know my daughter's going to melt down in public at some point. How can I prepare myself to respond for that? It's inevitable that I'm going to get in a car accident between now and the day that I stop driving. How am I going to respond to that? It's inevitable that I might feel disrespected by a student. How can I respond to that? And this may be just as I'm getting older, starting to recognize that I have the ability to respond versus react. And each time that I respond, but it gives me a little bit of confidence that if something comes my way in the future, that I will have the ability to respond. So I think by definition, Merriam-Webster would probably be more in agreement with what you said. A reaction might not be thought through, whereas a response is thought through. But in my world, in the way that I feel that I can operate best, a reaction does not move the people, the situation forward, whereas a response does.
Would you say that there's an appropriate time for both?
I think so. The easiest example for me to use is just parenting, is with my daughter. Someone once told me when I started teaching, always tell somebody why you're teaching them what you're teaching them. And so I try as a parent, as a teacher, as someone who interacts with other humans, explain to them why. Like, I'm going to tell my daughter, why we don't hit the cat. Like, not just don't hit the cat, but this is the reason why we don't hit the cat. And if I react and raise my voice every now and again, the message that I'm trying to send will ring through to my daughter because I don't raise my voice very often. So that reaction in the moment will often yield the result that I'm trying to get in the moment. But if I'm going to say that my values are to live, love, learn, and lead, that often that reaction that works really well in the moment is not really in line with my overarching goals or what I claim to be my values. And it's not forging a deeper bond with the person that I'm interacting with, in this case, my daughter. So in the long run, I don't know that a reaction is helpful if it's not in line with my values.
So what I heard you say was if there if so the situation you were explaining, right, that's a reaction, let's say. So you might as you were telling it, I thought to myself, you're punctuating the importance of the thing that you're trying to get across in that moment, whether or not you're doing it appropriately or in line with your values, that this is what's happening, right? So in a case like that, do you feel that punctuation, though, allows the recognition of the importance of that for her, right? Or I mean, was that your intent, or did you even have an intent, or was it more just like it was just like a knee jerk, like I responded like, we don't hit the cat, right? But at the same time, it's like because you very rarely are boisterous in that way, is it that, oh, she's like, man, I better pay attention to this because this is something different?
That's what I hope to have happen when I react like that. But I think reactions work very well often in the moment. Like if we have a coach or a boss that yells at us in the moment, they're getting what they want. But over the long term, is that the most effective approach? Yeah. And I think the most effective approach is a response. But in the moment, I think reacting, it works. Like if she's running past a hot grill, I don't want her to trip and fall into a hot grill. Reacting in that moment is a safe thing to do. Yeah. Yeah. But having the conversation with her about why we don't run out of control near hot grills is a response that might not need to happen in the heat of the moment.
That's interesting when you said that. I remember a time when we were all sitting around a campfire. My brother-in-law, he's a pretty big dude. We were sitting around the campfire, and the kids tend to run around the fire. They think it's fun, whatever, we're camping. And we keep telling them, don't run around the fire. You're going to fall in the fire. Don't run around the fire. And one of the kids ran really close to the fire, tripped on a rock, and almost went in. And he was able to move his mass to at a speed that I couldn't imagine, grabbed this kid and just plucked him out and threw him away from the fire and was like, and then reacted like, yeah, we don't got that. But it's interesting because when I think about what I was talking about, like I'm going to pull over, there's a safety thing, like that's the reaction in my mind. And I know what you're saying with the dissemination of, I do these things. I do the same thing with my family. Like I'll yell and then I shouldn't have done that. Right. But yeah, that's very interesting to think about, like how that works in what situations and how do we have an awareness around which one we're going to let, because one just seems like it's natural and the other one seems like it's intentional.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I'm trying to work on, I don't even know if this is possible, but I actually do feel like I am moving the needle on this, is can responses become more natural? And we've all been around, or I've been around very, very calm people that are just very peaceful to be around. And they don't get their feathers ruffled and they stay calm and they'll explain to the kid, hey, this is why we don't run by the hot grill. And they never have that, that super elevated voice or heart rate. And that could be a response. Yeah. But the way I try to frame it in my mind is for myself. Reaction tends to be a knee-jerk negative action taken on my end that maybe in the heat of the moment is somewhat helpful, but over the course of time doesn't help build the relationship, doesn't teach the lesson, those type of things, whereas responses do.
Well, now it makes me wonder, how much time do you spend on like thinking about those instances and when they arise? Like, how can I respond better versus how do I react? And actually a second is, how do you keep an eye out for the ones that are the reactions that then you would like to be responses instead?
Probably more than is healthy, honestly. Like I think about that. And it's not that I sit in the corner of the house and think, all right, if I get into a car accident, what am I going to do to respond? All right, if someone yells at me in the supermarket, what am I going to do to respond? It's more like, oh, this thing just happened. If this thing happens again, how can I equip myself to respond?
That's good.
Yeah, I was in the supermarket just last week, and here in New Hampshire and Vermont, there's still mask mandates everywhere, and I'm pretty diligent mask wearer. And I was in the store, and the lady in front of me was putting her groceries on the little conveyor belt, and I was without question, more than 6 feet back from her. And she looked at me and she goes, "Your mask is below your nose." And I looked at her and she was right. My mask had dropped below the tip of my nose.
Your nose is showing.
And I pulled my mask up over my nose and didn't say a word. And she goes, "Excuse me, I'm just trying not to die over here." And it shook me a little bit more than I expected. And I actually never ended up saying a word to the lady. A huge piece of me wanted to put her in her place, and a huge piece of me wanted to be very supportive of what she was saying and let her know that, like, I recognize that I made a mistake and that I was going to own it. But it got me so quick that I just felt it would be best for me not to do or say anything. But on the ride home, I thought, okay, if somebody else were to treat me in this same manner, what is a response? And that's all, So it's kind of taking examples from my life, learning from them, and trying to apply them down the road.
That's cool. Good on you. That's a tough one, especially these days.
And I'll spend time at night or when I have quiet time combing through my day and thinking about all the interactions that I had with people in places that I could have been better.
Yeah. You keep a journal?
Yeah.
Like at night? Do you write in your journal like what went on in the day?
Not about me. I keep one about my daughter.
Oh, interesting. Oh, yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So I've been hearing and learning a little bit recently about the difference between people that take a transactional approach and people that take a transformational approach. And a transactional approach is just, at least in my opinion, it's just like the business, right? So if I walk up to you and I buy something from you, I give you money, you give me the thing. Maybe I'm buying an umbrella off the street from you or something in the city. That's a transactional interaction between you and I. I provided the money for you, you provided the product for me. Maybe I say thank you and I walk away, right? And we all have transactional people in our life. We all have transactional interactions. And that's perfectly normal and perfectly natural in our culture to have those. And then we have people in our lives or interactions that are transformational, that make us or help us become better versions of ourselves. And that is one of my goals, is I want to feel that I am a transformational person for other people, so that someone doesn't walk away from an interaction with me and go, whatever. I want someone to walk away from an interaction with me and go, that dude just positively impacted my life. It may have been a little, but he positively impacted my life. Let me back up. As students, we can kind of comb through our history of education and think of all the transactional teachers we had. You walked into the classroom, you sat down, they taught you the content, and you left. There wasn't anything more than that. But we've also had transformational people in our life. Maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a spouse, that have really, really positively impacted who we are. And I believe that I'm more likely to be a transformational figure in other people's lives if I can figure out how to respond to stimuli rather than react. And that's important for me. And I think there's many things that I can do, that I can aspire to try to do to be a transformational figure in my community. And responding instead of reacting is an integral part of that. Because we're all going to struggle. We're all going to have challenges. We're all going to have obstacles. It's how we respond to those things that make us who we are.
Where did you find that? Where'd you come up with that on your own?
No, I didn't. I wish nothing that I say on this podcast.
That's not true. I've heard some golden nuggets from Peter.
The only thing I'm an expert on is myself, and I don't come up with much. That could have been a Ben Bergeron. That could have been. I listened to several different podcasts.
Yeah.
It could have been any one.
It sounds like a Ben Bergeron.
Yeah. But he'll admit that he gets a lot of his stuff from other people too.
Well, that's usually how it works.
Yeah, exactly. So
ideas in equals
we're just
ideas
regurgitating what we hear.
Yeah.
But that one struck with me, especially as a father and a teacher. I want to be transformational.
Yeah,
but I want to be transformational to the point where that person in the grocery store or at the gas station gets something from me. Maybe they don't walk away going, "Wow, that guy just changed my life." But in some way, my day is a little bit better because I interacted with him.
How do you, or do you, like, how do you gauge the efficacy of that? Just by the feeling that you're like, I did that right. Like, I could have been way worse at that.
Yeah, it's really difficult to gauge the efficacy of it.
Yeah, but how would somebody know if they were doing that, right? Like,
I think it's the golden rule. How would I want someone to treat me? I think that's kind of the way it goes. But I will tell you that, I've had students that I didn't think that I reached in any capacity, that I was completely transactional. And they'll reach out to me maybe even years later, be like, "Hey, Mr. D, I remember when you said this, like it really, really positively impacted me." I was like, wow, like you never know. Like the power of our words is insane. I had a conversation with a student today, and what he shared with me, he'll never know the depth of how it could positively impact me. And I'll try to explain it to him tomorrow when I go to school, but he won't really get the depth of how helpful it was for me that he shared what he shared with me.
Do you feel like,
so I think that's hard.
Do you feel like, that follow-up step though, right? Because that's kind of where I was headed, is a lot of people, I don't want to bias it, so I'm just going to spin it like this. Most people won't go back and follow up like you intend to do, right? So that in and of itself is a different approach than maybe other people might take. Not that that's the way you should gauge it.
Yeah, I keep in mind that when I share a lot of this stuff, it's what I'm striving to do. It's what my goal is.
Yeah.
I don't lay in bed at night and go through every single interaction I have throughout the day, but I'll breeze through my day in my mind and be like, "Oh man, where could I have been better?"
Yeah. Maybe if you do go back before you go to sleep, you could get 100s more often than not.
Yeah, so I think that's all kind of part of it.
No, I think that's a huge part. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I put it on my window. Like I don't put many notes on my window, and that's what I'm going to look at all the time now.
I saw you write something and touch the wall. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So anyway, am I successful with that? With some people, hopefully. With all people, definitely not.
Yep.
Where and how I measure that, I can't, other than using the golden rule kind of as my gauge.
That's cool.
Yeah, but I do think that the ability to respond overreacting is a really integral part of being the best versions of ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to do. It's like, and there's so many different ways to do it. I think. Like,
so true.
Like, so and where do you find the entry point? I think that has been the hardest part for me, is like, how long do you go on autopilot before you realize that you could be doing something completely different? And then you're like, I've wasted so many, attempts or so many years of my life doing this other thing that make no positive impact whatsoever.
I mean, we could make a really funny episode if you were to ask me to just start listing examples of times in my life that I've reacted. I mean, it's just crazy.
I mean, so many. Like, it's ridiculous. Yeah. It'd be interesting to think about what was the, what's been the biggest reaction, right?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes.
Or both ways.
When I think about the most, the people that I think are what I would deem as a high level peace of mind, people that I find to be very comfortable to be around, people that are really easy to interact with, often feel that those people are really, really proficient at responding.
That's good.
I have a couple, not immediate, but I have a couple family members that are that way, and they've been really inspirational for me.
That's awesome. How about your buddy, your I can't remember what it was. The guy that took the train to Connecticut. Yeah, the unoffendable. Is he that way? Does he have like that prowess?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, and he listens to every single one of these episodes, and he has no idea the level of the positive impact that he's helped me with.
That's awesome.
And just demonstrating that, like as kids. So we were pulling out of a parking lot.
He was that way even when he was a kid?
Oh my gosh.
Oh wow.
Forever.
I thought that was a learned thing. He's had this forever.
We were pulling out of a parking lot one time, and something happened. The car was stalling, and there was a semi tractor trailer truck coming at us that was going to T-bone us on his side. And he just looks over at me and just starts laughing. I was like, "What are you laughing at?" And I turn and look at him, and I see this truck through the side window, like coming straight at us. He's like that, and I'm like, "Dude, you got to tell me about like he's just super calm, super calm."
Wow, are his parents the same way? Where does he get that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Parents the same way. Yeah.
Interesting.
And I was actually very, very tightly wound until I went to college, and I was, and I knew him long before college. Plus, it's hard for hanging out with me. That's how tightly wound I was. But I hung around with kids in college that were super, super low key, and that was really helpful for me.
Interesting.
Yeah. Wow. So, speaking of college, speaking of our past, I thought it'd be fun to ask you 2 questions. I'm not allowed to ask 2 questions at once. All right, so I'm going to ask you the first question now.
Oh, well, I asked you 2 questions earlier, so we could bend the rules, I guess.
Can you please give me an example or story from your life where you reacted and it did not go well, and what you might have learned from that
Can you define reaction in this case?
by your definition of reaction?
Two things come to mind, but one story in particular. But it wasn't a reaction that I couldn't control that reaction. That's what was so crazy about it, right? So the situation was at work. I was working on this tool, and I was supposed to get this tool working, in software piece of script or something. I remember my boss was there, and there was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 people behind me, and I was sitting at this console in this server lab, and I had to put these commands in this command session and make this thing work. And I remember like the creeping feeling of anxiety, and like I didn't know what I was doing, so I was just very uncomfortable. And I remember like thinking and reacting any way I could get out of that, because I didn't understand what I was being asked to do. And at the same time, I was like, everybody's watching from behind you, so you have like this burning feeling of people watching. And what happened was very strange. I defaulted to like the class clown, or like, because I'm the youngest, and I was just like the funny kid in my family. And I remember everybody looking at me like, what is he doing? Like, why is that his response? And so that was my reaction. And what I learned from that was actually, I learned one of the most interesting things of my entire life that day. It was that saying you don't know how to do something trumps looking like a jackass trying to get it done, and then faltering to a point where where it becomes awkward for everybody involved. So that would be mine. Clearly now I would have said, I don't know how to do this, somebody else do it. But in that point in time, it was just so reactive.
How old were you when that happened?
I was probably 22, maybe.
Man, that is a lesson that I wish that I learned so much earlier. Man, that's a great lesson. And I learned it way later than the age that you learned it.
Yeah.
But
I don't know if I learned from it then. You know what I mean? Like, but I definitely learned it, but I don't know if I like employed, I didn't work that into responses until X amount of years later with, I don't know. Right. So yeah, very interesting. How about you? You got one? What you got?
Well, I was actually going to share a time when I reacted when it did not go well, and I will do that in a moment.
Okay.
But this is a time that I responded. It actually ties in really well with what you just shared. So I'm going to go with that one for right now. And because that's a question I'm going to ask you in a moment, is a time that you responded in a positive way that moved the situation forward or was a productive use of your action. But the first time that I remember in my life actually responding to something in a positive way was when I was 16 years old. And up until that, if anybody called me out on anything, I would totally flip it on them.
What do you
make them feel bad about even questioning me on this thing. Like, do what I could, if it was beg, borrow, and steal, lie, to make them feel bad about calling me. Like if I was not doing something on the soccer field or not doing something at work or whatever it was, if somebody said, basically if they called me out on slacking, that I would come up with some cheesy excuse or just try to make them feel bad about asking. That's the way I handled it. 16 years old. The first job I ever had was actually, I think I was 15 that summer. $5 an hour cash. I worked on a beach shoveling seaweed into the back of a pickup truck. And the guy who had the seaweed contract with the beach was also a contractor, and he did carpentry. And we were working one day seaweed, and he said, "Hey, I'm doing this job in town on this house, and if you want to make some extra money today, I'd love to have you come work with me." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm in. Let's do it." And basically what was happening was he was ripping the clapboards. If you don't know what that is, it's just the wooden shingles on the side of a house off and replacing them. So he was up on scaffolding, like 2 or 3 stories up, with a hammer, ripping the clapboards off the house. And the clapboards and the nails and everything are falling to the ground. And my job is to gather up all the debris, put it in a wheelbarrow, and wheel it around. We were in the back of the house, wheel it around the side of the house to the front yard and into the dumpster that was in a driveway. And when I was 15 years old, I was very physically weak and very physically small. So to manage a wheelbarrow full of wood was like, whatever, 2 or 3 times my body weight. And it was a lot it was a lot of rigorous physical work for me to do one lap with this wheelbarrow, right? So I'm doing everything I can. And finally I realized, like, man, like this is a lot of work. But when I went around the front of the house, he couldn't see me. So I'd go around to the front of the house and take my time and unload the wood into I wouldn't just dump. I was supposed to wheel the wheelbarrow up into the dumpster because it was a low dumpster ground height with a ramp that went into it, and dump it and then come back. And I would just kind of take the wood out one piece at a time and just kind of throw it in the dumpster. And this guy had a real short fuse. Speaking of reacting, that's all I ever saw this guy do. I never once ever saw him respond. Turns out later that he had a really bad reputation in town. I didn't know about this. So I don't know how long we're into the job, but I come around and he's looking at me up. I can picture it now still with like the sun behind him and like the silhouette of him up on the scaffolding. And he's like, Pete, why the F is it taking you so long? Why are you going so effing slow? And immediately through my mind went all of these things that I would normally say, like, I'm doing my best. I twisted my ankle in a soccer game last weekend. Like, just make up lies so people would feel bad about calling me out on stuff, because that was often what I did. And I looked up at him and I go, you're right. I own it. I said, this is really hard for me. And when I go around front, I take time off because you can't see me. And I'll work to be better for you. And he respected me so much after that, after just owning my shortcomings. And he ended up asking me to do a lot of other work and all sorts of stuff. And as a 15-year-old, I made a ton of money that summer. If you think that's even possible at $5 an hour, that's how much I worked. But that was a light bulb moment for me. Like, holy crap, this guy who's such an a-hole respects me so much because I was just honest with him. And from that point on, I was honest with people a lot more frequently than I ever had been, and it felt so good. So that was a response that I had in my life, and that was the reason why I share that particular story, is because it was a turning point in my life, and I recognized that I could garner the respect of others by admitting my shortcomings. And that's oftentimes, if someone were to ask me, what's a piece of advice you'd give to any kid, it would be that, like, to somehow build up the self-confidence to admit your shortcomings, own your baggage, and be willing to admit it to people. And so that was a big one for me.
$5 an hour. There's not enough hours in a day to make a lot of money at $5 an hour. I'm just saying.
A lot of money when you're 16 in 1993 is $650.
Maybe he was so impressed that he was padding your paycheck. He's like, yeah, that guy, I'm going to give him an extra 100
over here. So many Wu-Tang albums with that cash.
I own my tapes or CDs.
Every solo album, everything.
That would have been CDs, right?
In 93, nothing would have come out. Nothing had come out from Wu-Tang yet.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was a time when I responded and it went well. What about for you? A time when you responded and it went well?
Now that you told that story, I have one that's very similar actually, but a bit different. It was just a couple years ago, maybe even a year ago. My kids drive me nuts with the amount of, just as a blanket statement, I don't even know how to articulate.
I'm going to turn away from the microphone and laugh really, really hard right
you
now.
Go right ahead. Just hit the little mute. I don't want my kids to be like I am. Like, that's one of my things, right? Like, you don't want to go the way that I went, because that way is not the way that I think people should go. And, as we have these conversations, I think to myself, I've learned a lot of things throughout I've been that make me a person that I am now, that I wouldn't be otherwise. So it's not to say that I'm not grateful for those things, but when I think about the difference between the way my wife operates in the real world and the way that I see myself operate in the real world, I think to myself, you should be more like your mother. like you should listen to her more often than you should listen to me. So in that, wound up in that hairball of crazy expectations and just the way I am, is when I see them do things that I know is a waste of their time, it just irritates me to no end. And I usually just swallow it and I don't say a lot. But with increasing frequency, the older I become and the older that they get, I realize that this is becoming habitual behavior on their point. And so I feel like it's partially my responsibility to put an end to this, right? Or to somehow interact. And I fail at this all the time. But one perfect example is the Xbox, right? So I work in Microsoft. Sometimes I get these top secret, Xboxes, and, we bring them home and, we play on them. And I'm like, oh, it's so cool, that you guys can play this. So, here, go play this thing, and see what it's all about. Let me know if you find any bugs, blah, 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 whatever. So I'm partially an enabler for this, which is kind of ridiculous. And whatever, I fail all over the place, and this is just part of it. But
This is amazing. I
yeah,
love this.
but
Keep going.
here's the thing. Since work from home, like I've been watching the amount of data that I use, on the internet. Like I have to track that because I have to pay more if I go over, right? And so at work, I have huge payloads and files, things I have to copy up and down. And so it keeps ticking up. And so the last time that I updated the software for my modem, helpfully in some ways, Xfinity put a thing on there that's what has like these personas, so you can assign devices to different personas, and then you can limit those personas based on what you would like. So my kids are not kids anymore, but here I am managing how they connect to the internet, right? So for the Xbox, let's say, for example. And so it had gotten so bad that I was like, okay, if you're going to sit here for 5 hours, you have no throttle. So I'm taking this Xbox and I'm going to go put it in my room or put it in my car. Like I take it to work. I've done all kinds of crazy things. But this one time I put it in my room and I was going on vacation or going away for the weekend or something. And I know enough about my youngest son, Ian, who is 18 now. He is exactly like me. And so this is where it comes back to, I don't want them to be like me. I know that like he'll go into my room and like grab things, just takes liberties, like, oh, it's whatever, dad won't care, knowing good well that I'm going to care. So what I did was I swear I'll get to the end of the story. I took the Xbox and I put it somewhere where clearly he knows where it's at, right? And I rigged it to a point where like if he moved it, I would know like, oh, there's a piece of string under it, or something that I would know that it was toyed with. And I came home and I already knew in my mind, like when I got home, I was like, oh, it's definitely been, like, there's no doubt in my mind. I didn't have to check the app to see if it's been used or nothing. Like I already knew. So I get in there, lo and behold, it had been moved. Right. And so I almost went into a rage because I was just like, all the expectation, all the time I'd put thinking into it, all the times I've told him, don't go in here, it's off limits, blah, blah, blah. And I stopped and I thought to myself, how is this going to change anything? Because it's always the same thing that you're expecting. And I thought, wow, that's interesting to think that. And so I went ahead with it anyways. And I was like, you know what? I know you did it and you're not getting it back. Like it's gone. Like I almost took it out in the street and threw it like your loaf of bread. I was almost just like, I'm finished with this. Right. And then I stopped myself and I came back round circle. And it's interesting because I think I've told you this before too. What the point of awareness for me when I can see that space is when I have a strong emotion. Like I can feel it, like, oh, that was wrong. But if you don't do anything about it, that's kind of the reaction. If you do something about it, that's where the response lies, right? For me. And so yes. I went back in there and I get pretty emotional anyways when I'm dealing with just things that are meaningful to me. And so like I start crying about it. I'm just like, look, I set you up for failure and there's no reason I should have done that. And I knew I had this expectation of you. I should have just told you ahead of time that, whatever, we could have talked about it way before now. And now this has become something huge. And the look in his eyes was just like, really? Like you took the time to come in here and tell me this, even though you just put the hammer down on me and I totally screwed up. And I was just like, yeah, I shouldn't act in this way. Like, this is ridiculous for me to act this way. And he couldn't believe it. And we've had, great conversations and laughter about Xbox, and it ticks me off from time to time, but now he knows there's that expectation, or I don't know about expectation, but he knows that thing is meaningful to me to a point where he won't habitually overstep it anymore. So that, all that story to tell you, like, that's the response though, in the same manner that I heard you say. So yeah.
Yeah. How easy would it have been to take the Xbox and go smash it in the road?
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah, for sure. Right.
Yeah.
Or just keep up this.
Thing.
Yeah. Keep up this. That's it. It's the most difficult thing becomes the most rewarding thing in the end. That's what I have found in my life. And if you're afraid to go towards that thing, then you should heavily question why. And that's why, like we talk, like I like to lean into those uncomfortable situations, as uncomfortable as they are.
Yes.
I think that's where you can grow the most out of anything. So
have you ever heard the term, if you do the easy things now, life will be hard. If you do the hard things now, life will be easy. Yeah.
What do those people come up with? It's so crazy how people come up with that stuff, but it's so true. And when you hear it, if it has no tie to what you're doing or no relevance, like you just breeze over it, right? But when it hits you, then you're like, oh yeah, it's like wisdom from grandparents, like, I don't know, it's really weird.
Yeah, I guess we'll finish with this. a time in my life where I reacted. This is a good one.
I hope. I can't wait.
I ran with a pretty crazy crowd in high school and college, and my college buddies partied every night except Tuesday and Sunday. I think I've shared that in the past. and they would rage quite a bit, and they would get incredibly intoxicated and make bad decisions. And oftentimes their decision making negatively impacted me. They were amazing human beings. I'd take a bullet for any one of them to this day. But I didn't. I ran with them, but I didn't drink. It was just not something I chose to do. And they would get drunk and do stuff like throw up in my room. They'd take my clothes out to the nightclubs without asking. They'd do all this stuff. They'd pass out in the living room. And just, I don't know, I wake up in the morning, my toothbrush is gone. Like some drunk human being did something with my toothbrush, like to the point where like I don't feel safe putting it in my mouth anymore. Yeah. Like that kind of stuff, just stupid college stuff. And one night I just kind of had come to a head with all of it, and I was just frustrated with it. And I knew that I could never get back at them in a way that would work, but I could do something to their girlfriend, and that would really hit the home,
Interesting.
So my sweet mate is gone. I don't even know where he is. And things had kind of come to a head that evening. I was really, really frustrated. And I went into his bedroom, and his girlfriend was dead asleep in his bed. He had a giant, huge, it's like container isn't even the right word, like a jug of change. Had to have been $500 worth of change. So to get back at him, the poor girl, and I just took this change and dumped it all over his girlfriend, up and down from her feet to her head, back to her feet, back to her head, back to her feet, back to her head, and just completely covered her with his $500 in change. And then I pulled the pillowcase out from under her head, and I stuffed the pillowcase with food, like that would rot like overnight. And I put the pillowcase back on the bed. And that was how I wanted to get back at him. I was so mad. So she woke up the next morning and all this changed, so confused as to what was going on. And she was really, really upset with me. And he was really upset with me. And I was psyched that he was upset with me because that was the goal. But I felt bad for her. But the only way I could get back to him was to do something to her. So that was a complete reaction.
Huh.
I'll work hard never to dump $500 of change on someone while they're sleeping ever again.
I mean, how do you not wake up when there's that much change being dumped on you?
She was inebriated. She was inebriated. Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. That helps
the story. I knew she wasn't going to wake up.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
That's the kind of stuff that I used to do.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well.
I'm mortified and embarrassed to share that, but it's also pretty funny.
What kind of food was in the pillowcase?
So there was. Do you really want to know?
Yeah.
There was like a school sponsored like party or picnic earlier that day. So it was like all like lasagna and cookies and like huge catered.
Like some ribs. You got some pie in there.
Huge catered thing full of random food that I stuffed in the pillowcase.
God, that took some thought. Yeah. That's yeah, food.
No,
that'll do.
It was all reaction. It was all reaction.
Huh. Well,
another time I was so pissed. I took the closet door off my bed, and I took his sheets off and put the closet door on top of the mattress, and then put all the sheets back on. So when he'd go diving into bed, it would be a closet door.
Those are comedy.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's good stuff.
Yeah. I got one story after another from college. But anyway, that was a time when I really reacted, and I felt bad for her. Like I really did, and I own it now.
Did you tell her you were sorry?
I mean, just to put all that change back in that jug would take a lot of energy.
Yeah. Oh man, that's pretty good.
Anyway, yeah. So I think that I've progressed since then.
God, I would hope so.
A little further down the maturity continuum.
I'm gonna hide my hands if you ever come in proximity to me.
Yeah.
So good one.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah, man. That was good. That was a good laugh. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Yeah, if anybody listened to the end of it, I guess they get the reward of that story.
There's the nugget.
Yeah, awesome. Well, for those of you that are out there that may still be listening after hearing about my prideful moments in college and being frustrated, we really do appreciate your ears. We're incredibly grateful for your time. We want to thank you so very much for your attention. With that said, Schooling Struggle Podcast, we are out.
See ya.